In the hierarchy of the Sterling Pack, Omegas are invisible. They are the ghosts in the machine, cleaning the floors, cooking the meals, and keeping their heads down to survive. Clara Mitchell was exactly that, a ghost, until the night the blizzard hit Breckenridge. She found a baby, abandoned in the snow, a child that shouldn't exist. But the moment that baby grabbed her hand, everything changed. A burning gold mark didn't just appear on her skin, it branded her as the property of the most ruthless Alpha King in history. She thought she saved a life, but she actually started a war. This is the story of the Winter Bound. The wind on Highway 9 outside of Breckenridge, Colorado, didn't just blow, it screamed. It was a late January Tuesday, the kind of night where the temperature dropped to 20 below zero, and the air felt like swallowing glass. Clara Mitchell pulled her faded, oversized Carhartt jacket tighter around her frame. It was 3 sizes too big, a hand-me-down from the pack's donation bin, but it was the only barrier between her and the biting frost. At 23 years old, Clara was an Omega of the Sterling Pack. In the human world, that meant nothing. In the hidden society of shapeshifters that controlled most of the Rocky Mountains, it meant she was the bottom of the food chain. She worked the late shift at the Iron Skillet, a diner owned by the pack to launder money, scrubbing grease off the flat-top grill until her knuckles were raw. She was walking back to the Omega Barracks, a dilapidated structure 2 miles from the main estate. Her boots, bought second-hand from a Goodwill in Frisco, had a hole in the left sole. She could feel the ice creeping into her sock. She wasn't looking for trouble. Clara never looked for trouble. She had survived this long by being boring, by being silent, by being invisible. But then, she heard it. It wasn't a howl. It wasn't the chattering of a coyote. It was a sound that triggered a primal, biological panic in every mammal on Earth, the distinct, jagged wail of a distressed infant. Clara froze. The wind whipped her hair across her face, blinding her for a second. No, she thought. It's a bobcat. It's the wind through the pines. The cry came again, louder, desperate. Against every instinct telling her to run home and lock the door, Clara stepped off the ploughed road and into the knee-deep drift. She followed the sound toward a cluster of blue spruce trees near the edge of the rushing Blue River. The snow was stained with something dark that wasn't mud. It was blood, fresh, steaming in the cold air. There, tucked into the hollow of a tree root, was a wicker basket. It looked jarringly domestic, like something you'd see at a summer picnic, now dusted with frost. Inside, wrapped in a blanket that looked like it was woven from pure cashmere, was a baby. He was turning blue. "Oh, God!" Clara gasped, the steam from her breath clouding her vision. She dropped to her knees, the snow soaking instantly through her jeans. She reached in, her trembling hands fumbling to unbutton her own coat. She needed to get him against her skin. She needed to share body heat. The baby, perhaps 6 months old, had eyes the color of polished slate. He stopped crying the moment he saw her, his small chest heaving with silent sobs. As Clara reached for him, the baby's tiny hand shot out with the impossible speed for an infant. His fingers, cold as ice, latched onto her left wrist. The reaction was instantaneous. It wasn't just warmth, it was an explosion. A searing, blinding pain shot up Clara's arm, bypassing her nervous system and hammering directly into her soul. She screamed, falling back into the snow. But the baby didn't let go. His grip was iron. Where the baby touched her, the skin didn't just turn red. It began to glow. Intricate, swirling lines of liquid gold etched themselves into her flesh, smelling of ozone and burnt sugar. The light was so bright it illuminated the dark forest around them, casting long, terrifying shadows against the trees. Clara stared in horror at her own arm. The lines were forming a crest, a double-headed wolf crowned by a jagged mountain peak. She knew that crest. Every wolf in Colorado knew that crest. It was the royal signet of Alpha Garrick Sterling, the Alpha King, the man who was rumored to have killed his own father to take the throne. The man who didn't take a mate, didn't take prisoners, and certainly didn't have children. "No," Clara whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Please no." The baby cooed, his skin flushing pink, the hypothermia vanishing as if he were leeching the very life force out of her to survive. Before Clara could process the impossible mark on her wrist, the sound of engines roared over the wind. Not the rattle of local trucks, but the high-pitched whine of turbocharged engines. Floodlights cut through the forest darkness, blinding her. Tires screeched on the icy highway. Doors slammed. "Target located!" A voice boomed, amplified and distorted. "Sector 4. The signal is active." Clara scrambled backward, clutching the baby to her chest instinctively. She should run. She should leave the child and bolt. But she couldn't. The mark on her wrist pulsed in time with the baby's heartbeat. It felt like an invisible tether, chaining her to this child. 6 figures emerged from the blinding lights. They moved with the predatory grace of elite enforcers. They wore tactical gear, not fur, but Clara could smell the aggression rolling off them. Musk, pine, and violence. At the center of the formation walked a man who didn't need tactical gear. He wore a long, charcoal wool coat, tailored to perfection. He didn't rush. He walked through the deep snow as if the elements themselves parted for him. Garrick Sterling. He was terrifyingly handsome in the way a thunderstorm is beautiful before it destroys your house. He had dark hair, eyes that burned like molten silver, and a scar running through his left eyebrow that gave him a permanent expression of skepticism. He stopped 5 feet from Clara. He didn't look at her face. He looked at the bundle in her arms, and then at her glowing wrist. The silence that followed was heavier than the blizzard. "That," Garrick said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated in Clara's chest, "does not belong to you." Clara couldn't speak. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She held the baby tighter. Garrick took a step closer. The enforcers raised their assault rifles. "I said," Garrick growled, his eyes shifting from silver to a predatory gold, "give him to me." He was freezing," Clara managed to squeak out. "And now he is branded," Garrick observed, his gaze fixing on the golden tattoo still searing Clara's skin. A look of genuine confusion, quickly masked by cold fury, crossed his face. "Do you have any idea what you have done, Omega?" "I didn't do anything," Clara cried. "He grabbed me." Garrick extended a hand. He didn't ask again. The command in his posture was absolute. Clara, compelled by the sheer alpha aura radiating from him, tried to hand the baby over. But the moment she tried to separate her skin from the child's, the baby screamed. It wasn't a normal cry. It was a sonic pulse that shattered the windows of the SUV parked on the road behind them. The enforcers clamped hands over their ears, falling to their knees. Garrick winced, snarling, but stood his ground. Clara pulled the baby back, and the screaming stopped instantly. The baby nuzzled into her neck, letting out a contented sigh. Garrick stared at them. For the first time in 10 years, the Alpha King looked completely baffled. He looked at the mark on Clara's wrist, his mark, and then at the child who possessed a power that shouldn't exist. "Grab her," Garrick ordered, turning back toward the car. "Bring them both. If she tries to run, break her legs, but do not separate her from the asset." 2 enforcers hauled Clara up by her arms. She didn't fight. She couldn't. She was too busy looking at the mark on her wrist, which had finally stopped glowing, leaving behind a scar that looked like it had been there for 1,000 years. The ride up the mountain to the Sterling estate was silent and suffocating. Clara sat in the middle of the back seat of a chemically scented Cadillac Escalade. The leather was soft, heated, and worth more than everything she had ever owned combined. To her left sat a massive enforcer named Silas. She knew him by reputation. He was the pack's executioner. To her right was the baby, buckled into a car seat that had materialized from the trunk. But even separated by 6 inches of upholstery, Clara could feel the pull. It was a physical tug in her gut, like a fishing line hooked into her navel. In the front passenger seat, Garrick Sterling was on a satellite phone. He spoke in a language Clara didn't recognize, maybe Russian, maybe something older. His tone was clipped, lethal. They passed the iron gates of the estate. Most of the pack lived in the valley, but the Alpha lived in what the locals called the Spire. It was a modern architectural marvel of glass, steel, and black stone perched on a cliff edge, overlooking the entirety of Breckenridge. It looked less like a home and more like a fortress designed to survive the apocalypse. When the car stopped, the door was ripped open. "Out!" Silas grunted. Clara stumbled out into the underground garage. It was warmer here. The baby was unbuckled by another guard, but immediately began to whimper. "Give him to her!" Garrick's voice echoed off the concrete walls. He had exited the vehicle and was standing by the elevator, checking a gold pocket watch. "We don't need another sonic event blowing out the foundation." The guard hesitated, then shoved the bundle into Clara's arms. The baby instantly settled. "Follow," Garrick commanded. They took a private elevator up 40 stories. When the doors opened, Clara gasped. The penthouse was cavernous, with floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the snowstorm raging outside. A fire roared in a fireplace large enough to roast a whole elk. The furniture was stark, minimalist, and terrifyingly white. "Sit," Garrick pointed to a lone chair in the center of the room. Clara sat. She felt filthy in her grease-stained jeans and oversized jacket against the pristine decor. Garrick paced in front of her. He took off his coat, revealing a tailored suit that strained against his shoulders. He poured himself a glass of amber liquid from a crystal decanter, didn't offer her any, and downed it in one swallow. "What is your name?" he asked, not looking at her. "Clara. Clara Mitchell." "Rank?" "Omega. Kitchen staff. Sector 7. Garrick turned slowly. He walked over to her, looming like a thunderhead. He reached out and grabbed her left wrist, yanking it up to eye level. Clara flinched, but his grip was clinical, not abusive. He ran his thumb over the fresh brand. "Do you know what this is, Clara Mitchell?" "It's your crest, Alpha," she whispered. "It is a blood oath," Garrick corrected, his voice dangerously soft. "It is ancient magic, old wolf magic. It hasn't been seen in 300 years. It binds a guardian to a royal heir." He dropped her hand as if it burned him. He walked to the window, staring out at the white void. "That child," Garrick said, "is not my son." Clara blinked. "But the resemblance and the mark." "He is my brother," Garrick said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. "My father, the late Alpha, had many secrets. This one was kept in a cryo facility in Nevada until 3 days ago. Someone stole him. And now you found him." Clara looked down at the baby. "His brother?" The age gap was 30 years. "Why did he mark me?" Clara asked. Garrick turned back, his expression unreadable. "Because he chose you. The blood magic seeks a protector. It usually chooses the strongest warrior in the vicinity. Why it chose a malnourished Omega with 0 combat training is a mystery I intend to solve." He pressed a button on the wall. "Send in Dr. Aris." A moment later, A side door opened. A tall, severe-looking woman with greying hair and a stethoscope around her neck entered. She didn't look at Clara. She looked at Garrick. "Is the specimen intact?" she asked. "The asset is fine," Garrick said. "Check the girl." Dr. Aris approached Clara. She pulled a syringe from her bag. "Hey!" Clara jerked back. "What is that?" "Be still," Garrick warned. "We need to verify you aren't a spy. We need to know if your blood has been tampered with to trigger the bonding." "I was walking home from work," Clara shouted, fear finally giving way to a spark of anger. "I found a baby freezing to death. I didn't ask for this." Dr. Aris ignored her, grabbing her arm and drawing a vial of blood efficiently. Clara winced. "The bond is absolute, Alpha," Dr. Aris said, looking at the glowing mark. "If you kill her, the shock will likely kill the infant. Their neural pathways are syncing. I can see the pupil dilation matching in real time." Garrick rubbed his temples. "So I am stuck with her. Until the child is weaned or the bond is voluntarily broken, which requires a ritual that usually results in death. Yes, she is the anchor." Garrick looked at Clara with pure loathing. He was a man who controlled everything, the stock market, the territory, the politics of the council. And now, the safety of his family's most dangerous secret rested in the hands of a dishwasher. "Fine," Garrick snapped. "Clara, you are no longer kitchen staff. You are now the primary caretaker of the asset." "His name?" Clara asked, looking down at the sleeping baby. "Does he have a name?" "Asset 4, Garrick said cold. "Arthur," Clara said. The name just popped into her head. She looked at the baby, and the baby smiled in his sleep. "He looks like an Arthur." Garrick narrowed his eyes. "Don't get attached. You are a utility. Nothing more." Suddenly the elevator chimed. Garrick stiffened. He looked at his watch. "Damn it, she's early." "Who?" Clara asked. "Lydia Vane," Garrick said, adjusting his cuffs. "My fiancée. And if she sees you holding a baby that looks like me, with my mark on your wrist, she will burn this building down." The elevator doors slid open. A woman stepped out. She was stunning, tall, blonde, wearing white furs and diamonds that cost more than the diner Clara worked at. She carried the scent of expensive perfume and rot. Lydia stopped. Her blue eyes swept the room, landing instantly on Clara and the bundle. "Garrick, darling," Lydia purred, her voice sweet like antifreeze. "You didn't tell me we had company. And why does the help have that on her wrist?" Garrick stepped between them. "Lydia, go back downstairs." "No," Lydia smiled, stepping around him. She walked right up to Clara. The air in the room grew heavy with alpha female aggression. Clara shrank back into the chair, clutching Arthur. Lydia reached out a manicured finger and touched the baby's cheek. Arthur woke up. His eyes flashed gold. He bared his gums and let out a low, vibrating growl that shook the water in the glass on the table. Lydia snatched her hand back, her eyes widening. "What is that thing?" "That," Garrick said, moving to stand beside Clara, his body shielding her and the child, "is none of your concern." Lydia looked at Garrick, then at the mark on Clara's wrist. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. "Oh, Garrick," she laughed softly. "You have a bastard, and you've mated with the help. The council is going to eat you alive." "He's not," Clara started to defend herself. "Silence," Garrick commanded. He looked at Lydia. "Get out." "I'll leave," Lydia said, backing toward the elevator. "But you know the rules, darling. If you have an heir, the engagement is void. Unless the heir has an accident." The elevator doors closed on her smiling face. Garrick turned to Clara. The anger was gone, replaced by a grim determination. "Get up," he said. "We're moving you to the safe room. Lydia doesn't make idle threats." "Is she going to hurt him?" Clara asked, her heart hammering. "She's going to try to kill both of you," Garrick said, walking toward a bookshelf that swung open to reveal a steel tunnel. "Welcome to the family, Clara." The safe room was a misnomer. It was essentially a luxury bunker, buried 3 stories beneath the garage of the Sterling estate. The walls were reinforced concrete, lined with lead to block magical scrying, covered by silk wallpaper in a tasteful slate grey. There was a kitchenette, a bedroom with a king-sized bed, and a living area that cost more than the entire neighborhood Clara grew up in. The steel door hissed shut, locking with a heavy, hydraulic thud that echoed in Clara's chest. It sounded like a prison sentence. Garrick didn't relax. He paced the length of the Persian rug, his phone back to his ear. He had shed his suit jacket, rolling up the sleeves of his white dress shirt to reveal forearms corded with muscle and crisscrossed with faint white scars. Battle tallies. Clara stood in the middle of the room, still holding Arthur. The baby was finally asleep, his thumb tucked into his mouth, looking deceptively like a normal human infant. But Clara could feel the hum of energy radiating off him, a low-frequency vibration that buzzed against her ribs where the mark burned. "I don't care about the optics, Conrad," Garrick snarled into the phone. "Lock down the perimeter. Level 5 clearance only. If a fly enters this airspace without my permission, shoot it down." Yes, Lydia knows. She is handling it with her usual grace, which means she is currently plotting a coup. He hung up and threw the phone onto the velvet sofa. He turned to Clara, running a hand through his dark hair. The exhaustion on his face was visible for a split second before his alpha mask slammed back into place. "There is food in the fridge," he said, gesturing vaguely to the kitchenette. "The bathroom is through there. Don't try to leave. The sensors will trigger the halon gas system if you don't have the biometric key." "Halon gas?" Clara's eyes widened. "You have gas that sucks the oxygen out of the room installed in your guest house? It's not a guest house, it's a vault, and now you are the most valuable deposit." Garrick walked over to the minibar and poured a glass of water, his hand shaking slightly. Clara shifted Arthur to her other hip. The adrenaline of the blizzard and the confrontation was fading, replaced by a bone-deep weariness and a gnawing hunger. But more than that, she felt ridiculous. She was an Omega. She washed dishes. She wasn't built for political intrigue or high-stakes hostage situations. "He needs things," Clara said softly. Garrick paused, glass halfway to his mouth. "What?" "The baby." "Arthur," Clara said, her voice gaining a little strength. "He needs diapers, formula, clothes that aren't a cashmere blanket, a crib. I can't hold him forever, Alpha." Garrick stared at her, as if she had asked him to explain quantum physics in Sanskrit. "He is a wolf. He will adapt." "He is an infant," Clara snapped. The mark on her wrist flared hot, a spark of defiance that surprised both of them. "Wolf or not, he poops, he eats, and he sleeps. Unless you want this multi-million-dollar bunker covered in waste, we need supplies." Garrick looked at the baby, then at the pristine rug. A look of genuine horror crossed his face. For the first time, the Alpha King looked out of his depth. "Make a list," he grunted. 2 hours later, the bunker was filled with bags. Garrick hadn't gone himself. He couldn't leave them unprotected, but he had sent his most trusted lieutenant, Silas. The massive executioner had returned with enough baby supplies to stock a daycare, looking thoroughly embarrassed. Clara sat on the floor, assembling a portable crib. Garrick sat on the sofa, watching her. He wasn't helping. He was observing, his silver eyes tracking her every movement like a predator watching prey. It was unnerving. "Why you?" he asked suddenly. Clara clicked a plastic joint into place. "Excuse me." "The bond," Garrick said. "It's picky. My father spent 20 years trying to synthesize a bond like this for his soldiers. He failed. The magic requires compatibility of the soul, not just the blood. Why did the asset choose an Omega who works at a diner?" Clara looked up. "Maybe because I was the only one who didn't look at him like he was a weapon." Garrick flinched. It was a micro-reaction, barely a twitch of his jaw, but Clara saw it. "He is a weapon, Clara, whether you like it or not." Garrick leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "My father, Alpha Richard, was obsessed with the first wolves, the ancient ones who could shift into beasts the size of bears, who could control the elements. He believed their bloodline wasn't extinct, just diluted. He started the Lazarus Project." Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "The Lazarus Project? That's a myth. A ghost story Omegas tell to scare pups." "It's real," Garrick said darkly. "He experimented on himself, then on my mother, then on embryos. Arthur is the result. He isn't just a wolf. He is a throwback, a genetic prime. If the council finds out what he really is, they will dissect him." "And Lydia?" Clara asked. "Lydia wants to be queen," Garrick said flatly. "She comes from the Vane family. They are old money, old power, and ruthless. Our marriage was an arranged merger to stop a territory war. If she thinks Arthur threatens her position or her future children's inheritance, she will kill him without blinking." Arthur, who had been lying on the bed, kicking his legs, let out a gurgle. He reached his hand toward Garrick. Garrick recoiled. "Keep him away from me." "He's your brother," Clara said, feeling a surge of protective anger. She picked Arthur up. "He knows your family. He can smell it." "He smells fear," Garrick said softly. "And power." "Hold him." "No." "Coward," Clara whispered. Garrick's head snapped up. His eyes flashed gold. The air in the room grew heavy, the pressure dropping. An alpha command hovered on his lips, a command that would force Clara to her knees. But Clara didn't back down. The mark on her wrist pulsed, a warm, steady rhythm that acted like a shield. She stepped forward and thrust the baby toward him. "He is alone," Clara said. "I am a stranger. You are his blood." "Hold him." Garrick stared at her, stunned by her audacity. Slowly, as if moving through water, he reached out. His large, calloused hands took the small bundle. Arthur immediately grabbed Garrick's thumb. The air shifted. The oppressive alpha aura didn't vanish, but it changed. It softened. The gold light in Garrick's eyes dimmed back to silver. He looked down at the baby, and for a moment, the cruel, cold Alpha King looked like a man who was terrified of breaking something beautiful. "He's heavy," Garrick muttered. "He's perfect," Clara corrected. A comfortable silence settled over the room. It was broken by a low rumble from Garrick's stomach. Clara raised an eyebrow. "I can make grilled cheese. If the Alpha King eats grilled cheese..." Garrick looked up, the corner of his mouth twitching in almost smile. "With the crusts cut off? Don't push your luck." For that hour, eating sandwiches on the floor of a bunker while a magical baby slept nearby. They weren't King and Omega. They were just two people trapped in a storm, waiting for the monsters to come knocking. And the monsters were closer than they thought. The next morning, the illusion of peace shattered. Garrick had left before Clara woke up. He left a note on the counter in sharp, angular handwriting. "Meeting with the elders. Do not open the door for anyone but Silas. G." Clara felt the emptiness of the room immediately. Without Garrick's overwhelming presence, the bunker felt like a tomb. She went through the motions, feeding Arthur, changing him, pacing the floor. The bond on her wrist was quiet, a dull thrumming sensation, but she felt a phantom tug toward the door, knowing Garrick was moving further away. Around noon, a chime sounded from the console by the door. A video screen flickered to life, showing a young woman in a maid's uniform holding a covered silver tray. "Housekeeping," the woman said, her voice tinny through the speaker. "Alpha Sterling ordered lunch for the guest." Clara hesitated. Garrick had said only Silas. "I'm not hungry," Clara said into the intercom. "Leave it outside." "Protocol requires me to bring it in and clear the dishes from last night, miss," the maid said. She looked terrified. Her eyes kept darting to the side. "Please, Silas is at the top of the stairs. He cleared me." Clara looked at the monitor. The woman was an Omega. Clara recognized the slump of her shoulders, the scent of fear even through the screen. If Clara refused, this girl would probably be punished by whoever managed the household staff. "Fine," Clara sighed. She hit the release button. The heavy bolts retracted. The door swung open. The maid hurried in, placing the tray on the kitchen island. She kept her head down. "Thank you," Clara said, walking over. "You didn't have to." She stopped. The scent hit her. Wolves have a keen sense of smell, but Omegas are specialized. They are the nurturers, the gatherers. They are evolved to detect rot in food, sickness in pups, and subtle changes in pheromones. Underneath the smell of roast chicken and rosemary, there was something else. Bitter almond. And underneath the maid's fear, there was something sharper. Malice. But the malice wasn't coming from the maid, it was coming from the hallway. "Don't touch it!" Clara screamed, snatching Arthur from his bouncy chair. The maid looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "They have my sister." Before Clara could react, the maid pulled a small glass sphere from her apron and smashed it on the floor. Purple smoke exploded into the room. Wolfsbane. Concentrated, aerosolized wolfsbane. Clara coughed, her lungs feeling like they were filled with broken glass. Wolfsbane was fatal to shifters in high doses and debilitating in small ones. It cut off the connection to the wolf spirit. Clara fell to her knees, clutching Arthur. The baby began to wail, his cry high and piercing. A shadow stepped through the open door. It wasn't Silas. It was a man Clara didn't recognize. Slicked back blonde hair, wearing a suit that cost a fortune. He held a handkerchief over his nose. "Pity," the man said, his voice smooth. "Lydia wanted it to look like food poisoning, much cleaner. But we adapt." He pulled a silenced pistol from his jacket. "Who are you?" Clara wheezed, crawling behind the kitchen island. Her limbs felt like lead. The wolfsbane was working fast. "I'm the cleaner," the man said. He walked casually around the island. "Hand over the abomination." "Clara, I'll make your death quick. If you make me chase you, I'll make it last all afternoon." Clara looked at the vent in the ceiling. Too high. The panic button? On the wall by the door, past the gunman. She looked at Arthur. The baby's eyes were wide, glowing that eerie gold again. He wasn't coughing. The magic in his blood was burning the toxin out of his system faster than she could comprehend. "He's a baby," Clara choked out. "He's a threat to the succession," the man said, raising the gun. "Protect." The voice didn't come from Clara's head. It came from the mark. It wasn't a thought. It was a command that bypassed her brain and went straight to her muscles. The mark on her wrist flared so bright it shone through the purple smoke like a beacon. Clara felt a surge of power that was terrifyingly foreign. It wasn't her Omega weakness. It was alpha strength, borrowed, stolen, or gifted. As the man pulled the trigger, Clara moved. She didn't just dodge. She blurred. The bullet shattered the granite countertop where her head had been a fraction of a second before. Clara launched herself forward, not at the gunman, but at the heavy cast-iron skillet sitting on the drying rack. She grabbed it and swung with a force that should have dislocated her shoulder. Clang! The skillet connected with the gunman's wrist. Bone crunched. He screamed, dropping the gun. Clara didn't stop. The instinct was screaming in her ears. Kill, protect, destroy. She kicked him in the knee, shattering the joint. He went down, howling. Clara stood over him, the cast-iron pan raised, her eyes glowing, not the soft brown of an omega, but a swirling, violent gold. "Who sent you?" she growled. Her voice sounded doubled, layered with the growl of a much larger beast. The assassin looked up, eyes wide with terror. You're an omega. You can't." "Who sent you?" Clara screamed. The room shook. The glass in the cabinet doors exploded outward. "Vane!" the man shrieked. "It was Lord Vane, Lydia's father." Suddenly, a blur of motion at the door. Silas appeared, blood running down his face from a head wound, but still standing. He saw the scene, the smoke, the assassin on the floor with a shattered knee, and Clara standing over him like an avenging goddess, glowing with golden energy. And behind Silas came Garrick. Garrick took in the room in a single heartbeat. The wolfsbane smoke, the gunman, Clara. He didn't say a word. He crossed the room in a blur of violence. He grabbed the assassin by the throat and lifted him off the ground with one hand. "You touched what is mine," Garrick whispered, his voice vibrating with a lethal calm that was far scarier than his shouting. "Please!" the assassin choked. "I was just—" Garrick squeezed. There was a sickening snap. He dropped the body like a bag of trash. He turned to Clara. The gold light was fading from her skin. The adrenaline crashed. The wolfsbane caught up to her. Clara swayed. "Garrick!" She collapsed. Garrick caught her before she hit the floor. He scooped her up in one arm, grabbing the baby carrier with the other. "Silas!" he barked. "Get the car. We're leaving." "Where, Alpha?" Silas asked, eyeing the dead body. "The estate is compromised. Vane has people inside the perimeter." Garrick looked down at Clara's unconscious face. He brushed a strand of hair away from her cheek. His expression was no longer conflicted. It was resolved. "We're going to the hunting lodge," Garrick said, "in the unclaimed lands." "That's suicide," Silas warned. The rogues are easier to kill than politicians," Garrick snarled. "And if Vane wants a war, I'm going to give him one. But first, I'm going to burn his house to the ground." Garrick carried them out of the bunker, stepping over the assassin's body. He looked at the mark on Clara's limp wrist. It was still pulsing faintly. She had fought. An Omega had fought an elite hitman and won. "You are full of surprises, Clara Mitchell," he whispered. "Hold on, I've got you." The unclaimed lands were not on any official map. Located in a rugged, mountainous strip between the Sterling Territory and the Northern Packs, it was a lawless stretch of dense pine and jagged rock where the cell service died and the GPS spun in confused circles. It was where the exiles went. It was where the monsters that even other monsters feared went to hide. The vehicle, a heavily armored tactical rover Silas had swapped the Escalade for, crunched over a frozen riverbed. It had been 4 hours since they fled the estate. Clara drifted in and out of consciousness. The wolfsbane was a cruel poison. It felt like her blood had turned to slush. Every time she shivered, a fresh wave of nausea rolled over her. "Stay with me, Clara." Garrick's voice was a constant anchor. He wasn't driving. Silas was navigating the treacherous terrain. Garrick was in the back with her, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, pulling her flush against his chest. It was scandalous. An alpha king holding an omega like she was his mate. But the rules of society didn't apply out here in the dark. "Is Arthur?" Clara murmured, her eyes fluttering open. "He's sleeping," Garrick said, nodding to the car seat strapped next to them. "He hasn't made a sound. I think he knows we are running." The car lurched up a steep incline, tires spinning on gravel before finding purchase. Finally, the headlights swept over a clearing. A cabin sat there, rough-hewn logs, dark windows, and a chimney that looked like it hadn't seen smoke in a decade. "We're here," Silas grunted. "I'll sweep the perimeter. Alpha, get them inside." Garrick didn't wait. He kicked the door open. The cold air was a slap in the face, crisp and smelling of pine resin. He unbuckled Arthur's carrier with one hand, hooking it over his elbow, and scooped Clara up with the other. "I can walk," Clara protested weakly. "You can barely breathe," Garrick countered. "Save your strength. You'll need it to explain how you shattered a man's kneecap with a frying pan later." The cabin was freezing. Garrick set Clara on a dusty leather couch and immediately went to the fireplace. He didn't use matches. He crouched, his eyes flashing a brief, intense red and blue on the dry tinder. A spark caught, then a flame. It was a minor trick of alpha dominance, forcing the elements to yield, but to Clara it looked like magic. Within minutes a fire was roaring. Silas brought in the supplies, his face grim. "Tracks to the east," Silas reported, checking his rifle. "Old ones, rogues, but nothing fresh. We're alone for now." "Good," Garrick said. "Board up the back windows. If Vane sends a strike team, they'll come from the ridge." That night was a blur of fevered dreams for Clara. She burned up, sweating through her clothes, then froze until her teeth rattled. Through it all she felt a large, warm presence beside her. Cool cloths were placed on her forehead. Water was tipped into her mouth. She woke up just before dawn. The fever had broken. She was lying in a large bed under a pile of heavy quilts. The room was lit only by the dying embers of the fire in the main room. She turned her head. Garrick was sitting in a wooden chair next to the bed. He wasn't sleeping. He was watching the door, a combat knife resting on his knee. He had shed his dress shirt. He was wearing a tight black thermal that outlined the sheer size of his chest and arms. "You're awake," he said softly, his voice rough with fatigue. "You stayed up," Clara whispered. "I don't sleep when I'm hunted," Garrick said. He stood up and walked over, placing the back of his hand against her forehead. His skin was rough, calloused, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. "Fever is down. The bond metabolized the rest of the poison." "Where is Arthur?" "In the drawer." Garrick pointed to a sturdy dresser drawer lined with blankets on the floor. "The safest place." Clara sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. "Why are we here, Garrick? Truly. You have an army. You have the Sterling Guard. Why run to a cabin in the middle of nowhere?" Garrick sighed. He walked to the window, peering through a crack in the boarded shutters. "Because the Sterling Guard answers to the Council," he said, "and the Council is bought. Lydia's father, Lord Conrad Vane, has spent the last 10 years buying loyalty. If I had stayed, I would be fighting a civil war inside my own house. I needed to get Arthur out." He turned to look at her. "And you?" "I'm just the nanny," Clara said, looking down at her hands. The mark on her wrist was dull now, looking like a simple tattoo. "You are not just the nanny," Garrick said, his voice dropping an octave. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and crouched in front of her, bringing his face level with hers. "You engaged an assassin to protect my blood. You took a hit of wolfsbane that would have killed a lesser wolf. The bond didn't choose you by accident, Clara." He hesitated, then reached out, his fingers brushing the hair behind her ear. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through Clara that had nothing to do with the magical mark and everything to do with the man. Who are you, really? Garrick asked. Because no Kitchen Omega fights like that. Clara swallowed hard. My father he was a fighter. Underground rings. He taught me before he died. He told me that being an Omega didn't mean being a victim, but I promised him I'd keep my head down, that I'd be safe. You broke that promise, Garrick noted. I found a baby in the snow, Clara said, her eyes welling up. I couldn't just leave him. Garrick stared at her for a long moment, his silver eyes searching her face. No, you couldn't. That is what makes you dangerous, Clara. You have a conscience in a world that rewards cruelty. The moment was shattered by a sound from the drawer. Arthur was awake. Clara moved to get up, but Garrick stopped her. I'll get him. He went to the makeshift crib. He picked up the baby. This time there was no hesitation. He held Arthur securely, supporting his head. Arthur looked at Garrick, blinked his slate-grey eyes, and then did something impossible. The baby reached out and touched Garrick's chest. Garrick gasped, stumbling back a step. What? Clara cried, scrambling out of bed. What happened? Garrick looked down at his chest, then at the baby, his eyes wide with shock. He spoke to me. He's 6 months old, Garrick. Not with words, Garrick said, shaking his head. Images, feelings. He showed me the snow. He showed me you finding him. He showed me warmth. He feels safe. Garrick looked at Clara, a look of profound wonder breaking through his stoic mask. He isn't just a genetic prime. He's a telepath, a projector. My father didn't just try to recreate the first wolves. He tried to create a hive mind alpha. What does that mean? Clara asked, terrified. It means, Garrick said grimly, that if Vane gets his hands on him, he won't just control the pack. He will be able to control the thoughts of every wolf in the hemisphere. Garrick looked at the door, his jaw tightening. We can't stay here, he said. Vane will tear the mountains apart to find this child. We need allies. Who? Clara asked. You said everyone is bought. Not everyone, Garrick said. There is one pack that hates the Vanes more than they hate me, the Northern Exiles, the Iron Blood clan. The Iron Bloods? Silas asked, entering the room with an arm full of firewood. He looked pale. Alpha. They kill trespassers on sight. Their leader, Kale, swore to mount your head on a pike. Kale is a reasonable man, Garrick said, strapping Arthur back into the carrier. I slept with his sister. I didn't kill her. Clara blinked. You what? Long story, Garrick muttered, grabbing his coat. Pack up. We move in 10 minutes. They didn't make it 10 minutes. Clara was lacing her boots when the air pressure in the cabin dropped, a physical weight pressing against her eardrums. Outside, the bird stopped singing. Get down! Garrick roared, diving toward her. The front wall of the log cabin exploded. It wasn't a bomb. It was a living battering ram. A wolf the size of a grizzly bear, fur the color of wet asphalt, smashed through the timber, sending splinters flying like shrapnel. Silas opened fire, his rifle cracking loudly in the confined space, but the beast swiped him aside with a paw the size of a dinner plate. Silas hit the stone fireplace and crumpled, unconscious. The massive wolf shifted. Bones cracked and realigned, fur retracting into skin until a man stood amidst the debris. Cain, a mercenary known for selling his claws to the highest bidder. Alpha Sterling. Cain grinned, his teeth filed to sharp points. Lord Vane sends his regards. Through the shattered wall, 6 tactical operatives swarmed in, weapons drawn. Behind them walked Lydia Vane. She wore pristine white furs, looking like an ice queen surveying her kingdom. Give me the abomination, Garrick, she commanded, stepping over the wreckage. "Hand over the child, and I'll let your little Omega pet live." "He is my brother," Garrick snarled, placing himself between the gunman and Clara. "He is a monster," Lydia spat, raising a hand that glowed with sickly green witchlight. "Kill them!" The room erupted into violence. Garrick moved with a speed that blurred the eye, engaging Kane in hand-to-hand combat. Clara scrambled back, clutching Arthur's carrier, but a mercenary cornered her, raising a silver nitrate knife. "Sorry, sweetheart," the man sneered. Suddenly, the noise died. The gunfire, the shouting, the wind, it all vanished into a suffocating, white silence. Clara looked down. Arthur was awake. His eyes were no longer grey. They were two pools of molten gold. He wasn't crying. He was staring directly at the mercenary, threatening Clara. The gunman froze. His pupils dilated until his eyes were entirely black. He lowered the knife, turned slowly, and raised his assault rifle toward his own team. "Protect," the man said, his voice robotic. "Protect the asset." He opened fire on Kane's men. "He's controlling him!" Lydia shrieked, her composure shattering. "Kill the baby!" "Run!" Garrick shouted, kicking Kane into the hearthfire. He grabbed the unconscious Silas with one hand and shoved Clara toward the back exit with the other. They burst out into the snow, the sound of fratricidal gunfire echoing behind them. They ran until their lungs burned, sliding into a deep ravine hidden by a fallen spruce. Garrick checked Silas's pulse, weak but steady, then pulled a satellite phone from his belt. His hands were shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline. "Who are you calling?" Clara gasped, clutching the sleeping, innocent-looking baby. "You said we had no allies." "I'm not calling an ally," Garrick said, his eyes hard as flint. He dialed a number. "I'm calling a rival." "Sterling," a rough voice answered on the other end. "Kyle," Garrick said, breathless. "Lydia Vane is in your territory. She has witch magic, 20 men, and she's burning down your forest to get to me." Silence on the line. The Iron Blood clan hated trespassers more than they hated the king. "You have 1 hour, Kyle growled. "Then we hunt." Garrick hung up, a grim smile touching his lips. "The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Lydia thinks she's the hunter, but she just walked into a den of lions." The hour passed in agonizing silence. Then the snow erupted. It didn't begin with gunfire, but with a howl that shook the snow off the pine branches. Kyle's pack, the Iron Bloods, descended on the ridge like a landslide. From their vantage point in the ravine, Clara watched the chaos unfold. Lydia's mercenaries were elite, but they were fighting wild wolves on their own territory. They were overwhelmed by the sheer ferocity of the attack. Lydia, realizing her tactical advantage was gone, screamed in frustration. As Kyle, a massive wolf with fur like steel wool, lunged for her, she slammed a crystal to the ground, disappearing in a cloud of sulphurous green smoke just inches from his snapping jaws. When the snow settled, the massive grey wolf approached their hiding spot. He shifted, bones crunching, into a man who looked like he was carved from granite. Scarred, bearded, and terrifying. He looked at Garrick, then at the sleeping baby. "You brought a storm to my door, Sterling," Kyle grunted, wiping blood from his lip. "But seeing the vain witch run with her tail between her legs? That was worth the price of admission." Garrick nodded respectfully. "We need shelter, Kyle. The boy needs heat." Kyle eyed Clara, his gaze lingering on the fading gold mark on her wrist. An Omega with a royal mark, and she's still standing after a wolfsbane attack. The world really is ending. He spat in the snow. "Come, but if the boy screams again, you sleep outside." That night, in the safety of the Iron Blood fortress deep in the caves, Garrick sat beside Clara by a fire. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a quiet, thrumming intimacy between them. "We won the battle," Garrick said, tracing the line of her jaw with his thumb. His touch was electric, and this time Clara didn't pull away. "But the war has just begun. Lydia will return, and the council will come for Arthur. They will come for you." Clara placed her hand over his, feeling the bond hum, no longer a chain, but a lifeline. She looked at Arthur, who was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the empire he had nearly toppled. "Let them come," she whispered, her voice steady. "We aren't running anymore." Garrick smiled, a genuine, dangerous smile that promised retribution for anyone who dared touch his family. "No," he agreed, leaning in until their foreheads touched. "We are the pack now, and we are going to take back my kingdom. And that is where we leave Clara and the Alpha King, safe for now, but with a war on the horizon. What do you think will happen when the High Council discovers Arthur's true power? And will the bond between Clara and Garrick turn into real love? Or is it just the magic playing tricks?" If you enjoyed this story and want to hear part 2 of The Winter Bound to see how they take down Lydia, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Clara should become the queen, or should they run away and raise Arthur in the wild? Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.